Yeah, this, I can tell you right now, is going to be a really good thing that we do. And I think maybe we might have to do this live in the next hearing during the breaks when all the stupid people come on and say, I can't believe Trump sold a lie. We'll be like, what? So very excited. I just told you all about Jay and Noel. And thanks again to Rob Dog, longtime listener who suggested, because he follows both these guys on Twitter. They're both brilliant and hilarious. He said, you know what I'd like? 3 white guys. So thank you, Rob, and thank you, Jay and Noel, for joining me. I'm super excited to talk about the hearings and whatever else we get to.
100%. Great to be here. Thank you, Pete. And Noel, we talked earlier. So excited to be here. This is like Twitter royalty sitting with us, Pete. This is very awesome.
Yes.
You're too kind, Jay. I'm a big fan. I'm honored to be here with you and Pete, couple of real serious, smart comedians. I hope to learn something today. And good shout out to Rob Dog. Thanks, Rob Dog.
Yeah. Rob, thank you.
So he's going to absolutely love that. That's going to get him through the next 48 hours, by the way. He's going to share. He's just going to clip that out and share it. So you both watched today's hearings. You know, I actually was just like, when he suggested, it's like, it'd be great to have a conversation with both these guys. They pay really close attention to current events. They tweet really funny things and thoughtful things about it as well. And it'll be great to just talk to them. But then I realized, well, they're both watching these hearings. We're all watching them. I actually thought they were tomorrow. And so we can basically talk about your reactions to them, which I think is going to be, frankly, better and certainly more entertaining analysis than anything we saw on the cable news network. So, guys, let's get to it by starting with going to Noel to talk about his actual relationship with so many of the people whose names we're hearing, specifically Rudy Giuliani, who, Jay, you had some thoughts about Giuliani. But first, you both did. I got to hear. No, how do you know this? How do you know America's mayor?
Well, I'm a New Yorker, and I used to live at 180 East End, across the street from Gracie Mansion, during all the 9/11 years. And my uncle was an editor at New York Magazine, a political writer who covered Giuliani when he was mayor, and then went to Time Magazine and actually had to write the cover story, the America's Mayor cover story. Wow. So it's personal. And the first time I met Giuliani, I was doing the Goodwill games with him in the 90s. We were shooting him down the old Wintergreen. There was a thing outside of the old Twin Towers, and we had Pataki there and all, Ted Turner and all these guys. And Giuliani wouldn't get out of his makeup chair because he didn't like a joke we had written for him to say, right? And he crumpled up the piece of paper, threw it in my face, and cursed me out. And said, I'm not getting out of this freaking chair until you change this joke. And, I'm like a little PA on a headset. I'm probably like late 20s at this point. Like, Mr. Giuliani will not get out of his chair. And he's just cursing me out. And the joke was, welcome to New York. It's a great city. Just don't jaywalk. Right. Completely mild,
and innocent.
Right. And he threw a complete tantrum. So that's who he is. And I'll shut up now, but I tell people this. Trump is more odious. Giuliani, rather, is more odious a person than Donald Trump. And Donald Trump wears a diaper,
How could you say that? How could he say that? What do you think about Giuliani, Jay? He's saying he's worse than Trump as a person, which he knows both these guys, but I'm going to argue hard that can't possibly be the case, Jay.
Well, if I could just speak for Noel for a second, just based on that story, that it's not so much that he's the more odious human being, but he kept two faces up a lot longer than Trump was able to. Trump has, sponge cake brain, so it's very difficult for him to not be him. Even when he tries to be for a little bit, like, I'm going to be a statesman, it lasts for like 8 seconds before he starts naming names of his enemies. But Giuliani, I was, hoodwinked by him. I spent, all of the early 2000s going, that guy got us through. Without him, like, in my brain, it was almost like he was up on the Twin Towers trying to swat the plane away. Like, that's how much I connected him to the aftermath of 9/11 and like how he saved everything. And the slow unwinding of him, the slow gin-soaked unwinding of Rudy Giuliani has been like devastating for me. But from what I'm getting from what you're saying is he was always this guy. Yeah. He was just able to contain it, like the Ghostbusters containment unit, for a long time until the booze and the age got to him.
That's Correct. How I felt. That's how I felt about Mark Gastineau. How you feel about Giuliani? Similar fall from grace, but also, You both commented on Twitter about the references to Giuliani's inebriation. By the way, it would have been so funny for Zoe Lofgren, I think her name is, Congresswoman. They're really obviously trying not to be political here, but it would have been funny if while she was, reading the objective report, she just said, as an aside, Rudy Giuliani, who had possibly the longest fall from grace of any American in history, said blank, blank, but obviously she wasn't going to do that. But Noel, what about his drinking? What's the deal?
He's a drunk. He hangs out in the Grand Havana Lounge every night, which is the private club on top of Jared Kushner's 666 Fifth Avenue, literally, and holds court and gets drunk. And he's been a drunk for a long time. And I'm not faulting anybody for that. As some of you guys know, I'm in recovery myself a long time. There's no shame in dealing with an issue. Having people that are still in active addiction and alcoholism make decisions on behalf of the country is incredibly dangerous. I pointed out in a comedic way, but it's terrifying because anybody who's in active addiction knows you're thinking about yourself and your own self-centered fears and desires and resentments. And what we saw was a White House seething with that sort of thing, with actual open drunkenness. They testified today. He was the only one who got the president's ear, a drunk guy. At 2 a.m, it was like, snort some more Adderall and go out there and tell them you won. And we can grift for this off of the next few months. And they did. They made $250 million in the coming months.
Yeah, it's the most profitable venture Trump's ever been a part of.
Bingo.
If I could just take a minute here to shout out, because I'm sure she's listening, Liz Cheney. The comedic timing. First off, she's been blowing me away this whole time. I know that as a progressive, her opinions of how the country should be run are odious. The thing that I like about Liz Cheney is that we both agree that there should be an America with a democracy. Right. So I can put aside whatever feelings I have about her to sort of extend a branch across the other side. But the comedic timing that she had on the apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani was just chef's kiss. Just wonderful. Nicely done.
She just said apparently inebriated. And I thought, it's interesting you point out that moment. I guess I thought to myself, that seems a little cheap way to say what you should say in such a hearing, which is intoxicated on alcohol or something more specific. But inebriated might be the most accepted and impactful word to describe the type of drunk, Noel, that he was. And you wrote, Rudy has been a drunk for decades. Glad it's finally being called out. And I'm glad that you mentioned you're in recovery. I don't think I knew that. I hope it doesn't bother you that I'm drinking whiskey here at 2:30 in the afternoon. I have no problem. But I mean, it's also important just to defend your point, which is, yes, we all know people or are people who are in recovery or addicts, but that we all generally, I hope, agree, especially those who are in recovery, that person should not have the president's ear, and too often in America in history probably has.
Right.
But I mean, how bad is it, and how his drinking, and how bad was it that he was apparently the final guy getting to talk to Trump sometimes, and he's going to listen to him? Why is he listening to him, Noel?
Right. Well, because Trump's an addict too. They're buddies. And we don't need to go into all that. You make some excellent points. I'd like to say, imagine how drunk you have to be for that statement to get in the congressional record. Drinking is acceptable. I was the in-house bike messenger for the Congressional Budget Office when I was 18. I would deliver packages all over Capitol Hill and stuff.
He's fucking Forrest Gump, Jay.
I did a lot of weird shit, but I was a bike courier in DC, and they would set up bars outside of representatives' offices on Friday. Like, you would have happy hour. Booze is part of how business gets done in DC. Old school DC was a 3-martini lunch. This stuff isn't looked down on. This is not a town of teetotalers. So imagine how drunk you would have to been for the hearsay to make its way back up to the Hill and to come out in such a forceful statement. And I agree with Jay, just brilliant comedic timing. And I don't think enough praise can be heaped on Liz Cheney. I too am a progressive, and I don't agree with her politically, but she harkens back to what politics used to be. A true conservative, two different sides, compromising, but knowing that the greater good and the rule of law is the bottom line, not somebody's ego and ability to grift.
You give her more credit than I will, but I'm not far off. The point is, she voted with Trump 92% of the time, but she drew the line at the big lie. That's the way I say it. Jay tweeted at Jay Black is funny, by the way, is his Twitter handle, in case you didn't know and you're not following. You wrote, I like that they stay on Rudy long enough to watch him look up, trying to remember his memories floating in a pool of middle shelf vodka.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's, they did do that. They cut to him a couple of times, and you could see, like, they always say which direction your eyes look when you're trying to come up with a memory and when you're trying to come up with a lie. And I think his just rolled straight up back into his head as his brain, like, I imagine it looks like, like you're looking through a pond or something, just waves and shapes. But yeah, I mean, to just further the point that Noel made about, like, what you need to do, you're in a room with Jason Miller,
right,
Stephen Miller, right? And the collection of Addams Family characters that is the Trump inner circle, and you stand out
right,
as the bad one, where everyone's going like, I don't know. Stephen Miller is draining the blood of a rat for sustenance, and looks over, and there's Rudy Giuliani, and you're going, oh yeah, that guy's messed up. I don't know if he should be here, boys. He's a little out there, Jason Miller, you make him a smoothie.
Right. Don Jr. is in the room. Larry Kudlow is in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like David Crosby giving you an intervention. You know what I mean, dude? I think you
Oh, we're doing well. This is going to be a thing. I think this is going to be a thing. I'm feeling good. You guys your audition tape is really, I know
Let's
that
make it happen.
This is a break for both of you being on my Shed podcast. So, but no, here's the thing that really this is, to me, one of the most important points from today is kind of not about the hearing. I think the hearing actually was so well done today. I was a little critical of night one, only because I think Benny Thompson is a snooze, and why have him there when there's 50 people who are better performers. But today I thought it was so well done. My only criticism is, why was it at 10 a.m.? Why did we leave primetime? But putting that aside, this is where you guys, I really want to hear your analysis, because this is what was missed. And I even texted, I won't say who, but I know most of these cable news pundits, and from time to time, I rarely do it. But if no one's going to make the most obvious point for an hour and I'm screaming, I got to make it. So I texted a friend of mine who was on CNN, and I said, listen, you're all sitting there acting, and so is Adam Kinzinger and other people on the panel, as if you're surprised that Trump grifted the American people, that you're surprised that he told a lie, thus leading to the insurrection. When any New York reporter, anybody who'd ever written about Trump, and certainly our Noel Casler, knows this, and all these apparently psychiatrists who wrote a book by Bandy Lee and others, this man will say no to anybody who doesn't tell him what he wants to hear, fire them, until finally one of those clowns walks in with their makeup and says, sir, those Jewish space laser attacked at the machine. He's like, thank you. No, like that point, acting like we didn't know, this is who he's always been.
Well said. I agree with you. I mean, the obvious has never been pointed out with Trump. They never point out that the emperor's wearing no clothes. We all knew on January 6th what it was about and who caused it. He had been tweeting it for weeks, months beforehand. Come to DC. Trump, I'll make this analogy. A lot of the American media and political system was based on an honor system, right? We didn't really have like fail safes because we thought nobody would really egregiously go beyond the line. It was like in the country when you see an apple stand and it's like, here, leave $5 and take a quart of apples or something. Trump came by, took the money jar, burned down the apple stand and took all the apples and kept going. And everyone's like, is this normal? Trump... Can I make one more point? Like he wears you down. A lot of my stand-up started because I wanted to tell the stories of what was happening behind the scenes. And the first season we did the Miss Teen USA contest, he inspected the contestants. I've told Pete this before on his show. He inspected them, and it cost an hour of union time. We had DGA union, all this stuff. It cost a fortune. Everybody was outraged. What happened the next year? They wrote it into the schedule. Non-crew call. Trump.
What does the inspection entail again?
He'd stick his fingers in their mouth and check their teeth and stuff. He was looking for like they were horses. I mean, it was it was gnarly. But my point is, Trump normalizes, bad behavior. It's almost like, to bring it back to the addiction analogy, it's almost like addiction is a family disease, right? Al-Anon exists for a reason. You get sick around these lies and almost covering up how bad it is. I think a big part of our national consciousness and media got sucked into that. Like, hey, it's still the president. We got to treat him with respect. Why? He's not treating us with respect. Right. He didn't show up at Biden's inauguration. You know, he burnt the place down and left town.
So well said. Although Jay, I will, Jay has defended those inspections of those young women in the past, and I'm not sure
100%. Yeah, no, I've been on several podcasts. My pro teen inspection platform. It's hurt me, Pete. I'm going to be honest. I think it was a mistake. I don't know if I can just make 2 points. If I was raised by my mom is a narcissist, and one of the things that she's dead now. I had nothing to do with it. The thing that you notice about them is that you tend to interpret other people's actions through your own lens. So you go like, well, I wouldn't do that unless I had a good reason to do that. So they're probably doing the same thing. They're not lying about this because I wouldn't lie about this. And I feel like that's what Trump has preyed on for the last, 50 years, is that he will interact with people and you give him the benefit of the doubt because human beings give other human beings the benefit of the doubt. And once he stakes out, like as you said, he normalized it, he stakes out that place, and that's just the way it's done now. And it's just the only thing you need for that is, narcissism and no shame. But I want to push back just a little bit, Pete, on the idea that I agree with you 100% that the news media is covering this poorly. And by the way, I watched it on the YouTube feed from the Washington Post, which if you've ever seen a group of people that don't know how to broadcast trying to do a broadcast, that's a show all in of itself, where they're getting cues, but they don't know how to get cues in their ears. They're like, hold on, wait, I'm going to go to this guy now.
We're a newspaper.
Yeah, why should that happen? But I love the clinical nature of how the hearings are being run. They're not making it emotional. They're not shocked or outraged. It's especially when Liz Cheney's talking. It is just someone who has every single receipt, and they're just laying it out there in a very controlled manner. Like, here's the evidence, guys. It's all here. I'd love for the media to jump in and go, we know. But so far as convincing the country that there needs to be an indictment, this is the best way to go about it.
Let's go back to two of Noel's tweets. I forgot this one about Giuliani, which is important. Who among us is not gone shit-faced in the White House and asked a president to ignore the results of a Democratic election so you fleece a bunch of rubes for another couple of months?
Yeah.
And he copied Rudy Giuliani on that. But to move it along, we have to talk about Bill Barr. Because you wrote, this is, again, like, it's funny as both these guys are, they're also really great analysts of politics. And I think, as comedians often are, human behavior, and Noel nails it with this, Jay, I think. Bill Barr is probably the most arrogant son of a bitch to ever serve as attorney general. And you could just see how he thinks he's cute, testifying about all the bullshit Trump was spilling, yet he praised him in his resignation letter and failed to warn the country what was coming. A traitor's traitor. And then Noel thoughtfully copied at JOP on that one. Noel, tell me more about your thoughts on Bill Barr.
Well, I mean, I've had a problem with Bill Barr for a long time. People forget, but he was the guy who got Elliot Abrams and these guys off from the Iran-Contra affair, where they literally slaughtered villages. El Mozote was a village that was slaughtered in El Salvador. All the people were slaughtered. Bill Barr got those guys off. Bill Barr is a cover-up man. He's an inside dude, and he's a rich punk who went to Horace Mann and Columbia and would beat up hippies. I went to the Hackley School proms where his dad was a headmaster. They called him Chester the Molester. We all know his father hired Jeffrey Epstein, to teach at at one of the other Upper East Side schools.
Yep.
The name Dalton, to teach at Dalton. He had a dog in this fight. When Epstein got arrested, Bill Barr first said he would recuse himself because he had worked at the law firm that recently represented Epstein. And then he said, no, I'm actually in charge and all the information needs to go through me, right? So Barr is a guy who knows how to cover his ass. And this is a long-winded way of saying when he sent that resignation letter and he left that day in January, right before Christmas, all I could think was, how hinky is the plan that he's now heard about, that Trump and these guys are about to launch, that the guy who had no problem with literally massacring women and children in Central America was like, this is a bridge too far. I'm out of here, right? I'm out of here, guys. I can't deal with this. Even me, Darth Vader, So And you could see the smugness. He was holding court in there. He was adjusting his papers. He wasn't nervous. He knew that he was the powerful man in there. It reminded me of his confirmation hearing, where he's like, well, that depends on how you define what is or whatever.
Right,
you know,
right? Yeah,
yeah. I remember. I was gonna say the only time I ever saw him be flustered for a moment, it wasn't on 60 Minutes. It wasn't on any major, journalist grilling him. It was when Kamala Harris asked him if the president ever had asked him to, what was it, the question?
Right.
But he was flustered for that one moment. But mostly he's the most confident guy in the room. And I mean, anything else about him where you finished? Sorry, no.
Well, it was open an investigation. I believe
Right.
Kamala said, has the president ever asked you to open an investigation into somebody? And well, how do you define open? How do you define ask, which means he did it every day, probably.
Yeah.
But it's contemptible. Okay. Because Bill Barr could have prevented all of this. If anybody in that inner echelon could have walked away and said, this is going too far, something's up here, don't believe the big lie, don't come to DC. As the principal law enforcement of this country officer, I implore Americans to stay home on January 6th. Don't endanger the lives of these brave men and women that protect our democracy. And he did the opposite. So as far as I'm concerned, there's cops' blood on his hands, and he's the AG. Or was.
Well, it sounds like you don't like him. But Jay, your thoughts on man who looks most like a real life Fred Flintstone and the former disgraced Attorney General Bill Barr and his performance, and anything that you disagree with about the character assassination just laid out by our new friend.
So no, I'm 100% with
on
Noel.
slaughtering innocent people in Central America. I've heard you defend that as well. It's pretty gross.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. A lot of my defenses, Pete, have backfired on me. I don't know why I keep making these stands. I don't know why I'm pro all these things. No, but in all honesty, I agree 100%. I think there was I had a reply to Angry Staffer on Twitter where he was talking about this is the Bill Barr redemption tour. And I honestly don't know. Would I trade Bill Barr's redemption for Donald Trump finally seeing some sort of justice? And I think I would. Yes. You know what I mean? If it means that we all have to pretend that Bill Barr is a good guy for the next 10 years, if there's just one little iota of justice that, Trump spends 2 years in a minimum security prison, just something where he gets to see a consequence. Because all of those negative traits that Noel mentioned were effective in his testimony. The fact that he was speaking from on high, where his opinions were just like fact, that, calling it bullshit, saying, like laughing, the laugh that he gave to Dinesh D'Souza's 2,000 Mules was the best review that anyone could have ever given for that. Just, I was waiting for 2,000 Mules, and then the laugh. All of those negative traits go a long way to being convincing that that Trump knew what he was doing and was wrong in doing it. And that's what we need from this.
You wrote on Twitter about that. The hearty laugh following Barr's mentioning of 2,000 Mules is all the review anyone needs of that poorly baked pound cake of bad ideas, Jay. Well done. Well,
it's you know what? I don't want to brag, Noel, but I have a state college degree in English, and I think it could be seen in that metaphor. I'm very proud of College of New Jersey. Shout out. Thank you for all the help you've given me.
That's impressive stuff for sure. Let's ask Noel about his relationship with Ivanka Trump. And then Jay, if you could just gear up for all of the jokes you have about her, that'd be great. And
okay.
Noel has plenty as well. How do you know, what do you call her again?
Vanky. Vanky is my nickname for her. And I was her handler, as you know, Pete. I did 6 seasons of Celebrity Apprentice finales, and the final 3 I got switched to her because my job in live TV as a talent handler was basically to take care of the divas. I was the guy I did the Tony Awards for 20 years that were on last night. Like I would take care of the host. I'd do Michael Jackson at the VMAs, Madonna, whoever was going to ask for the most stuff is who I would end up getting assigned to. And that became Ivanka. When she pushed out the other people, I forget his name, but the guy you worked with, Pete, who got pushed out, Bill or whatever. There was the older guy that everybody loved on The Apprentice, and then Trump kicked him to the curb.
His right-hand man in real life, who I attacked on television when I asked, what was his name? George,
yeah.
The old man, George. I was on The Apprentice, in case you both didn't know. The whole thing was They had to do a fundraiser, and they did a comedy show, and me and a couple of other comedians who you guys know, Jim Florentine, Carrie Louise, and George was in the audience. And I said, I was just doing crowd work. I was like, George is here. Now I know George's a veteran. And I said, but I don't, what I don't know is if it's Confederate or Union. And so then they cut on The Apprentice. The edit was cutting to whatever, and like, oh my God, Pete Dominic's attacking George's right-hand man. This is not going to be good for us. But George laughed. And then a year later, I saw George and his wife at a country club gig I was doing, and they were so happy to see me. Anyway, Noel, sorry, but that's a great story. I had to share it.
I had to get it in there, man. I love that story. I crack up all the time. But anyway, so she was the diva. You know, she asserted herself as like the, you know, the person to watch, and she was basically running the show behind the scenes besides Mark Burnett. So I hated this assignment because everybody else would get a crew call for like 4 o'clock because the rest of the cast was like Meatloaf and Tom Green. It wasn't like heavy lifting, you know, it was like little pipe and drape, a case of water, we'll be good. They'd be like, no, you got Ivanka. You got to show up at noon to meet her trailer and her glam squad. So we shot the last 3 seasons at the Museum of Natural History in the parking garage underneath, right? And she had this gigantic trailer. I mean, you would have thought Will Smith was coming or something. It was like she had a sweatshop in the back. It was like ridiculous. And she had a 5-person glam squad, 5 people. And she would sit there for like 4 hours in hair and makeup. And she has to breathe through a straw because she can't breathe through her nose anymore because she's had so many nose surgeries and stuff that it doesn't really work. So I saw her at one point breathing through a straw as they were doing like, you know, makeup around her and stuff, like really crazy stuff. And, you know, so that's why I don't like her. Not, you know, from a personal standpoint, because it was like, you're going to speak for 30 seconds. You're literally going to go there, stand next to your dad and be like, excellent pop-up shop, Omarosa. And then that's it, you know, and I'm here at noon in a parking garage, you know, so.
So what do you think of her testimony thus far? I mean, on night 1, she threw her dad under the bus, and then on this testimony, apparently she was replaced with an animatronic Ivanka, but nonetheless, what did it say? I forget.
Yeah, it was like Avatar or something, you know. She's basically like, you know, I'm not involved. I'm above it all. I didn't see any of it. And that's their game plan. You know, they're really calling the shots. There's nothing that happened in that White House, I guarantee you, that Jared and Ivanka didn't have a hand in. When I worked with Trump, he wanted music to play when he walked in a room. He wanted to get high and he wanted to hit on women. Jared and Ivanka wanted to run the world. They had a long game. I mean, it wasn't apparent then that he was running for president, but it was apparent then that they were looking at the opportunities, you know, and how to commodify them, you know, how to monetize every single situation. And I'll shut up here in a minute, but she was her dad's handler. You know, like I was Ivanka's handler. She was the one who they would bring in to get her dad to do something. One point, he didn't get out of his SUV because we didn't have a golf cart for him. And he was freaking out. And we're like, the entrance is 30 feet away. Like, all you got to do is get out and walk into the museum. He's like, I need a golf cart. You know, it's like, it's a museum. You can't run a golf cart through the halls of the Museum of Natural History. Right? So we'd have to get her to go and assuage him. And that phony, breathy voice, that sibilant S kind of stuff she does, that's a complete put on. That's to appeal to her father. Her real voice sounds, as I've told you before, Pete, she sounds like me. She sounds like a trucker from Queens or something. She curses and she's got there's an old clip of her on Conan. You can look it up, your listeners, and you hear her original voice. So
maybe I'll grab that. Amazing. Jay, what is the best job someone in your family got you? The most astounding thing, it should always be mentioned, that the president of the United States appointed his daughter and others, her daughter's husband, to the most important positions, handling the most important issues. And that kind of nepotism wouldn't fly in any mayor's office in America. It would not fly. The last time it happened was RFK, I think, and it was bad then. Jay, have you received any benefits due to nepotism, and what do you think of Ivanka Trump?
Well, I did get to mow the lawn at my house. My dad gave me that job. I didn't have to earn it. He just gave it to me when I was 12, and I mowed lawns for 6 years. It was pretty heady stuff.
Well, you put a landscaper out of business, apparently.
Yeah. Real fast, if I could just ask Noel a question. Was she with Jared at that point?
Continue.
So Was it a steamy, passionate relationship? Was it like they couldn't keep their hands off of one another? Like when they walked into the room, it was like a sex bomb went off. Like there was like crackling energy between the two of them. Am I guessing right about this?
It was palpable, Jay. I would need to smoke a cigarette. The two of them together would feel like an orgasm by osmosis, just being near them. The heat between those two people. No, when I first started working with them, they were dating. Then they broke up. They were broken up. And then they came back and they were engaged. And what happened in the interim was Wendy Dang Murdoch, the ex-girlfriend of Putin and the ex-wife of Rupert Murdoch, during their breakup, took Ivanka sailing off the coast of Turkey, I believe, but over in Europe, somewhere in the Mediterranean, and said, you need to get back together. That's your guy. So when I came back the next season, they were all of a sudden engaged because it's an arrangement, an arranged marriage, right? It was a power couple brokering these two imminently corrupt families. Charles Kushner is just as corrupt as Donald Trump. He just does it on the DL, but he's a complete scumbag. They have the same business model. They're basically slumlords. I don't like that term, but they own lots of low-income apartments up and down the East Coast, and they harass their tenants and rip them off. Same thing Trump has always done. So they were an arranged marriage, basically. And I don't think Jared is, I'm probably more his type than Ivanka is, if you know what I'm saying. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we certainly weren't, homophobic on that show. Our nickname for him was Cunanan, if that gives you any idea. Right. And it wasn't, and I don't say this often because I don't want it to disparage, LGBTQ community or even sound like a joke. And half the people in the crew were gay and stuff. My mom's a lesbian. Like that, it wasn't said out of like homophobia. It was said he reminds us of a gay serial killer. Like that's the vibe you got from him.
God. Now, Jay, you hate gay people specifically.
I'm just waiting for one of my trolls to take these statements and string them together. It's like Pete Dominic reveals the real Jay Black and just post it underneath everything that I tweet. But I'm curious about what Putin's ex-girlfriend would see as a red flag in somebody, like when you're getting advice from her.
Right.
Like how many people has he murdered on your behalf? Well, I would have to say none. Like, I don't know if he's right for you. If a man loves you, he'll kill your enemies for you. That's what
exactly.
That's the basis of a good relationship. Yeah, that's interesting because their relationship fascinates me. And your analysis of day one, Noel, is 100% correct. Where she threw him under the bus, and it seems like there's a lot of people, and I would put Barr into this category as well, of people that were just trying to wait out. Right. From the election to January 6th, January 20th, but January 6th got in the way, that like just none of them wanted to speak up because they were just, it was like the end of the plane ride and the baby will have to fall asleep eventually. And that's what they were hoping would happen. And it didn't. And now they're facing the consequences of their inaction and trying to all say, well, what was I going to do? It's like, well, you were the president's daughter. I'm pretty sure if you had spoken up on TV at some point, like, hey, my dad is senile and, addicted. Was it Adderall? No,
Adderall. Yeah, he snorts Adderall.
That was my addiction.
Okay.
I'm sober as well. I did a lot of Adderall and booze. And every time I saw him, I said it a couple of times, he has all of the trademarks. And if anybody has ever done that drug the wrong way,
right, that
it's all there. The mouth, the dry mouth, the eyes, the inability to break off from a thought is all Adderall. So it's nice to get confirmation of that from someone.
I had no idea that I was getting together YouTube quitters. How do I get Adderall?
Well, you go to a psychiatrist in your network and go, I think I have ADHD. And he goes, do you want 30 milligrams of Adderall IR? And you go, that sounds fine. And then 3 years later, you sleep 2 hours a night like Don Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, and I'm very active in recovery with a lot of young people. Adderall has replaced cocaine in terms of an abuse. It's just like every person under 35 is like, well, college, Adderall, and booze.
It's a better high. It's a better high if you're comparing the two.
And maybe I have no idea. I'm talking on my ass, but in a short term, it's like you can actually overdose more easily on cocaine. So it's more dangerous. Maybe it's more fatal, but you can get just as addicted to and really fucked up on, life ruining, fucked up on, especially at that age, on Adderall and the other ADHD drugs as well that I'm sure are similar molecules.
No, do you have any insight on Don Jr.? Because I don't sense Adderall from him. I do sense cocaine from him.
Just straight cocaine. And when I worked with him, they were dry. You know this. You're in the program. So Don Jr. was dry. Ivanka was dry. Don Jr. relapsed. Somebody else in the administration was dry / sober. I won't mention his name because that's not cool, but obviously relapsed. A certain economic advisor who would go on the Sunday morning shows and slur his words was sober for a while before. But my friend Tom Arnold helped Eric Trump try to go to rehab, took him out to Hawaii and tried to get him sober. So they were dry. If you guys remember, Eric Trump got his ass kicked at the Comedy Cellar in 2003. He got really drunk. Yeah, he picked a fight with a table next to him, and a guy from Staten Island in the Bronx or Brooklyn kicked his ass because he was laughing at a racist kind of like, there was a racist inference that some comedian had, and like,
no.
Yeah, I know. Imagine, right?
And that comedian, Pete Dominic.
Right.
A lot of people don't know that.
Bingo, he got you back. Call back. No, but he got really like boisterous and spilled his beer on some dude's girlfriend, and they took him outside and kicked his ass.
By the way, I'm not racist. I made that joke knowing Eric Trump would laugh and get his ass kicked. Give me some credit.
Yeah, exactly. It was a good plot. I guess that explains Eric's face. He got it bashed in, and it just stayed that way.
Right. But there's actually Don Jr. It's on the New York Post. Like, and Trump called Noam's father and made him apologize and stuff. Anyway, old news. But
Noam is the
owner of the Comedy
of the Comedy Cellar. Formerly, his dad owned it. But is it true that Trump snorts cocaine off an extinct animal's tusk?
Yes, 100%. And Trump Sr. used to do coke too. He was doing lines in the back of a limo at a VH1 show. Coke is like party time. Adderall is his maintenance high. Adderall is what he would use when he had to read a word off a cue card and sort of sound smart, in my experience with him. But all bets are off when it's, hanging out with a bunch of models in the club and all that kind of stuff, which he did for decades. You're not hanging out in Studio 54 in the late 70s and early 80s and not doing cocaine. You know what I mean?
No, you get it like a Happy Meal at McDonald's. They just give you the toy on the way in. Here's your spoon.
When I prepared to talk to you guys, now I'm not going to make a joke about your recovery. I had no idea about, I think I knew about Jay, actually. Maybe I know about Noel. I probably blocked it out so I could continue with mine. But I think that your analysis on this stuff and your ability to relate to it, it shows both a sympathy and an honesty that you can. Let me ask you both, though, about the Fox News fella that showed up at the hearings yesterday. His name is Chris Steyerwalt. He was fired by Fox, right? Jay, you wrote on Twitter, I like how proud Chris Steyerwalt is of his algorithm and what is it, piling?
I said polling.
Polling.
I misspelled it. I said pilling is what Jason Miller does.
I've never done that
in my reply.
You're right. He seems to be passionate about getting things right at the decision desk. What is exactly why Fox fired him? Truth is a liability when your mission statement is, quote, spoon-feeding lies to the cult. So first, more of your thoughts on his, I guess, integrity and his testimony in terms of what it meant, what it means for the public conversation, and frankly, what it meant on election night, Arizona. I mean, that was such, I felt like, an important thing. And also, let's not forget to just absolutely shit on Chris Steyerwalt for his ending testimony that he winked to the panel. Did you see that? It really bothered me. But
well, two things. I think one, he's sort of a good representative of whatever the walls were between the news and the opinion department of Fox disappearing over the last, from 2016 on. I think they did take some pride in the fact that they had a top-rate news organization. It just went through the lens of all the late night BS from the people that spun it. And I think, with all the people that have left, Chris Wallace is the one I'm thinking of most, but also Shep Shepard, is that his name? Shep Shepard?
That's right. Yeah. Shep Shepard.
Okay. All got to leave. And I think that this is probably the emblematic version of that, that he had a system. He talked about the algorithm and he talked about the polling and how it worked. And I thought that was beautiful testimony because it undercuts all of the thought that this could possibly be something that was being influenced by politics, because he nerded out. You could see the nerd in him, the data nerd, where he goes, "Oh, well, we had this great thing. We had a polling, and what we did was we would just match the polling to what we were getting with that, and we could tell, and it was so much better than everybody else's. And here's who we worked with." And it was like just like my son talking about Legos, like he just got what he was doing with that. And I'm like, I buy 100% that this guy cared about getting it right, regardless of where he worked. And the second he did get it right, and it sort of undid a lot of the narrative that they were trying to spin, it shows you what Fox has become, even worse than it was, that he was immediately ejected out of the building.
Noel, thoughts on Fox News, former Fox News election analyst Chris Steyerwalt, and his performance today?
It's a great point. I mean, there were, people forget this, but there were serious news people at Fox News. I got a buddy who's been there for 25 years. He was at the local affiliate in New York, and he went network level. He's an anchor on the weekends. I won't name his name. He's not one of the big nighttime personalities, but he's a news guy. And he calls me up all the time. He's like, "Noel, keep going after them. This is insane." And what he told me, he goes, even under Roger Ailes, it wouldn't be as bad as it is now. Right. And we know Fox News has had a huge impact on the culture since they began in 1996, and Murdoch has made a fortune off of it. But for what Jay just described, the policy wonks and the news guys that are really into dealing with facts, it's become a hell on earth. And this guy described to me, he said, Tucker Carlson, for example, all of his staffers are like 27-year-old racist dudes. Like he's like, it's just all these white guys sitting there all day trolling online, looking at the Daily Caller and whatever is sort of trending in that demographic that will impact somebody's emotions.
Yeah,
and
he has a whole team. He has 19 young people, I think they're Patriot Front, whose sole job is to spin the news for even unreported instances of a black person beating up a white person, so he could make sure that his viewers think that's the issue and epidemic in America. And I made all that up, but it's probably not far off.
It's very true. The New Yorker did a profile, and that's essentially what they said. They look for race-baiting, inflammatory issues all day. And this guy described to me, he said, look, it's hell for the normal people that still work there. I mean, it's a big building, right? There's cameramen, there's audio techs, there's guys that aren't scum of the earth that need a paycheck and have families. And for them, it's almost become a hostile environment. And today's a great example. Like, that guy got fired for telling the truth, and good for Fox News for calling it. If they hadn't called Arizona for Biden, it would have given a head start to the danger that we already saw,
I've often said that if you were a parent of like one of those 27-year-old kids working at Fox News, I would just tell everybody that my son's a porn star, or like he mops floors at a strip club. Like, I would like, what is that? How did he get it? He went to a strip club from J school. Yeah. I don't know how it worked. The thing fell apart for him. But he's definitely not working at the most dangerous network in America and making that happen.
It's a real insult to strip clubs, I think, clearly, that are run by
the mopper at the end. That's the problem.
Yeah, that guy.
You got to go in the VIP room.
Do you think, just your quick political analysis, both of you, the question you hear the most is, will the fever break? Will anybody in the cult watch these hearings? And if they do watch them, will anything come to light? What do these hearings mean? I mean, I think the best case result is that the Department of Justice, sees them as a criminal referral and indicts Donald Trump. Best case. And we're not legal analysts, but we're as good as anybody on politics and certainly on behavior. So, Noel, your thoughts on what, if anything, this changes in terms of the conversation, and does anybody that's in the cult see these? A, and B, if they do, they're like, wow, he debunked 2,000 mules.
Exactly. I don't think he peels away people from the cult because they're being told not to pay attention. What I do think happens, and I agree with your point, hopefully DOJ comes out with some charges. That's what needs to be happen. So I think it will be the end of Donald Trump as an ongoing business venture in electoral politics. I do hope and believe that. Most people probably don't want to hear this. I think an unfortunate side effect is that it's going to give power to Ron DeSantis. It's going to make the powers that be. New York Post ran an editorial after the first hearing on Friday morning, saying it's time to get away from Donald Trump. So I think it'll become a bit of a rebranding of the MAGA movement, and they'll sort of package DeSantis like, here's the saner, here's Trump with discipline. You know, so
Right.
yeah, he did do some bad stuff and he ripped some of you guys off, but this next guy's definitely going to use your money for the campaign and not to pay his lawyers, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting analysis and a perfect segue to Jay Black, who is constantly defending Ron DeSantis as one of the good
Yeah.
ones. And again, really surprising you being such a strong progressive, but something about that state or that man that really appeals to you.
I just like how he bullies the press. I do. I'm a DeSantis head. I just, you know, the way he hid COVID numbers and let people die in his state. I mean, that's just a man's man. It's called being an alpha, Pete. Look it up.
Oh,
maybe one day. So I'm very hopeful that you're right, Noel, that this is the end of Donald Trump, because I do think, and this might be hopeful thinking on my part, that Donald Trump is a cult of personality that can't be replicated. There is, you know, MAGA right now is just the turnkey for racists to feel better about themselves, right? All of these people are saying things that they've wanted to say out loud for years, and now it's finally okay to do that because you're not being racist. You're owning the libs.
Not to feel better about themselves, but to feel like the victims. The polling of these people is that they are more discriminated against and victimized than black folks. So go ahead, Jay. Sorry, but it's more that they want to feel like the victims, not even better about themselves, but that makes them, I guess, feel better about themselves. Go ahead.
And this again, pure speculation on my part. I don't see MAGA dying because I do think Ron DeSantis and, you know, to a lesser extent, like the Matt Gaetzes of the world, if he doesn't go to jail for what he did, they'll keep it going. But I don't see anybody showing up, you know, to an insurrection party on behalf of Ron DeSantis. You know, I don't know if he has that kind of pull over people. You know, the depth of Donald Trump's narcissism was such a black hole. You couldn't not look. Right. And we're still talking about him. Right. You know, again, there's a hearing going on, but we're going to talk about him forever because of that depth of the black hole of his soul. But one last piece of hopeful thinking. I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I don't believe that, you orchestrate these things. But if you were prepping the country, and I'm not talking MAGA, but if you were prepping the middle of the country, sane Republicans and independents, for an indictment from the DOJ, these congressional hearings are the best way to do it, because this isn't a press conference from Merrick Garland. This is 6 days and nights of just evidence being laid out in a methodical manner. And if you arrested him right after that, or within a reasonable time frame of that, it's a lot easier to go, well, if you want to know why, go look at all the stuff we just presented and be done with it. So that's my thought on that.
Well said.
Yeah. Anything you'd add to any of that, Noel?
Incredibly well said. And that's what has to happen. I mean, if they are going to indict him, they got to do it right away. You can't give the rest of the summer off and then try to do it in the fall when the midterms, because then they can just cry politics again. And I agree. You're not getting rid of MAGA anytime soon. It's going to take a couple of generations to wash this sort of ignorance and racism out. It's like, Jerry Garcia died in 1995 and the Dead and Company just started a new tour last night. Do you know what I'm saying? Horrible analogy. I'm an old deadhead, but it's like the show is going to go on, without the figurehead. Trump will become a deity in absentia for these guys. But the vehicle is too profitable and too easy. And that's a bigger issue. That's something that us as comedians can address, because we're all the same people, and it becomes down to, to personality and behavior. Like, we're better than this as Americans. And I think that's the next challenge, is to is this really what you want? I
don't know if we are better than this.
I know. I'm just trying to be hopeful.
I mean, a certain percentage of us might be, but you got to take, I sometimes want to take us the whole sum. Before I close, I want to ask you both one more question. Jay and I talked a while ago about, doing something where we talk with each other publicly about our struggles, men of a certain age. And you guys have both been open about your sobriety, your recovery here. And I made fun of you for it. And so as a way to, also as a way to just, kind of fill that mission that Jay and I have talked about, because Noel, you're this kind of guy. Would you mind both telling me a quick story about basically maybe how bad it got and how maybe there's someone listening that needs to know it gets better? Noel?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I was working that glamorous life, TV, rock and roll bands. By the time I hit my early 30s, I hit a bottom that was ending me up in the hospitals. I was in the hospital in New York City 12 times before I went to rehab. And rehab for me was NIH, the National Institutes of Health, because they were going to do some experimental protocol, and I was like, oh, that's for me. Give me a magic pill and get me, back in shape. And I went down there and they said, the only magic pill is working a program of recovery. It's surrendering and living one day at a time and learning about your disease and seeking out a meeting where you can get support and getting honest with yourself. And it was the best thing I ever did with my life. That was 17 years ago. It hasn't been a straight path. I went out at 10 years. I'm coming up on 7 years again. It is what it is, but it's something I do every day. I was on a meeting this morning. I'll be at a meeting tonight. I do service. I don't talk about it specifically because that's one of the traditions, but help is out there. And never have we needed that more than now, right? Because we're all under pressure and trauma, the most of us. And like when you can get support and share about your issues, there's no shame in that. It makes you stronger to help people. And you find that other things matter to you more. For me, it used to be about glamour and living the good life. Now it's trying to be useful. I just want to be a worker among workers and be useful because we're here for a limited amount of time. Why not do something real with it? Any of your viewers are welcome to DM me anytime if they want some help.
Well, that is really thoughtful of you to share. I would say you're failing at being useful, but I don't want to be a dick.
Yeah, no, I was going to DM you that, no, but I would have felt bad.
No, you are. I mean, I'm so happy that we did this today, and I really appreciate what you just said. I had no idea that it was that bad. And while you don't do the things, you do them for altruism and quietly because it probably works, but it's also really great when you can share it. So to you, Jay.
So one of the things just to tag on that idea of altruism, I got a lot out of group. I would do group every day when I was in the program. I was in an outpatient program to figure it all out. And one of the things that you do is, at first I was such a dick about group because I'm a comedian and I kept going up to people afterward. They tell their stories and go, I could punch that up. If you want, because you amble a lot, you got to get to the getting a little quicker. I could just throw you a couple jokes. But after a while, you sit there and you get to know these people. You do the same thing every day. Every day you're talking to these people. And this magic thing happens where you start to go, you start giving people advice. Like, you shouldn't feel this way about yourself. You're not this person. You're an okay person. And I've gotten to know you and I like you. And I know you've done terrible things, but those things can be amended and that's okay. And you realize the whole point of group is you're talking to them like how you should be talking to yourself, because you go, oh, these people are me. And I'm giving them this love that I was incapable of giving myself, in large part because I was on these drugs. And this like sort of flower opens up, where you're just like, oh, I should be kind to myself and others. And that's sort of how we get through this. And just to tie it all up with a bow, we're talking about the young men that work for Tucker, this sort of, inchoate anger that's just out there and that has been harnessed, you talk about Steve Bannon looking at World of Warcraft players and going, if I could weaponize this, right, I could win an election. Just these, angry young men who have no ability to express themselves or to feel loved by anything other than the other people in this hate group is, when we talk about mental health, ban the assault weapons. But if you're really going to do something about mental health, talk to these young men and say, you're okay. You're an okay kid. We can fix this so that they don't turn into hate mongers later on.
Although, did you see the pictures of these Patriot Front guys? I'm not sure you could say you're okay. Some of them clearly, their parents were directly.
No, we have to we have to get them earlier, Pete. We just got to get them like in high school.
Jay, sorry to step on your really poignant, thoughtful, honest story with my joke. That was speaking of a flower opening up, boys. This was amazing. I can't thank you both enough for being here and doing this with me. And sometimes you're doing a good thing, and today's one of those times. Thank you very much, both of you.
Hey, Pete, thank you for putting this together, because not a lot of people, if I could just be nice to you for a moment, would jump on a suggestion from a listener in a reply tweet and put together a show within 48 hours and make it all happen and get everybody together. And I just want to say this is the most fun that I've had all weekend because I've been with my family. You know how that is, Pete.
I understand.
But it's just awesome. I really appreciate you guys having me, and nice work, Pete, Dominic.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
I agree.
All right.
Stand up.